Okay, welcome back, grade 10s. Going through the speaker. So now it's possible to look at the poet and see what details can be obtained from them. Is it possible to see the gender or age of the speaker? Is there some race or religious reference to pick up on? Then can we see if the speaker is directly communicating their thoughts. So the speaker is basically important in that it is the poem's or the poet's persona. Please remember, don't say the poet, you say the speaker, because the person speaking in the poem is not always the poet, right? So the speaker can be a first person speaker, it can be a second person speaker, it can be a third party speaker. So first person again is eyewitness, as the actual account. It's the actual account of something. It's me first hand experiencing it. Second speaker is when it is someone eyewitness. They saw what happened and they're speaking about it. It hasn't impacted them personally. And third party is usually they use it for a third omniscient, all-knowing, a speaker that will speak on someone's life. That's not part of the story, but they're speaking of someone's life and they're informing us as readers. Okay, so the recipient, so once the poet is understood, it is possible to move on to who or what the poem is designed for. So who are they trying to express themselves for, and why have they chosen to express it in a certain way? So if it was a poem written for children, for instance, it would be expressed in a different way. They would use a lot more humor cues to maintain the reader's attention. So the recipient is important because it outlines how the poet will go about expressing his views, as well as the diction, the choice of words that the poet will use. Okay, so a poem about, for example, a poem about spring could just be a happy statement that the writer has ended. Looking from the other side, this could be an attempt to attract someone's attention, or maybe just an introduction to plow the field. Right. The purpose of the poem. So obviously the purpose of the poem, why the poem has been written, is important for analyzing the poem, right? It's a given. Language and imagery. Until this point, it was only possible to analyze the literal information available, which is the denotative meaning. Now let's look at the imagery, symbol, and figures of speech. This is a connotative meaning. So you have denotative and you have connotative meaning. Denotative is D for denotative, D for dictionary. It's the dictionary meaning of something. And connotative is for C for connotative, C for care. It is the emotional attachment connected to that word. So for instance, if I use the word red, its denotative meaning, it's a color. But its connotative meaning is it invokes danger, love. So all of the symbols that's been attached to that word, right? So here, symbolism can be used against a word, but it can also be an image that is created sort of from our understanding of things, right? So it's very subjective. Again, like we said, it depends on the recipient. So here, imagery, this is where you should look for pictures described within the text to analyze why they have been depicted. For example, if a poet has decided to describe the moon, this could set the time in the work or maybe the mood of the poem. Right, also look for groups of images described with patterns. Usually poets group things sometimes also by making them rhyme. So if two words rhyme, they connect them, right? It depends on the poet and what they are hoping to achieve. Symbols. So when looking for symbolism within the text, this could be an event, or physical object, including people, places, so on and so forth, right? So, for example, a bird flying through the air can be seen as freedom and escaping usual conforms. Poetic devices. In your analysis, you'll look at the techniques like metaphors, similes, personification, or alliteration, right, that can be used. So for example, when comparing something within the text using a metaphor, then look at how they are connected, in what way they are expressed. Try to use an all available clues to gain better insight into the mind of the poet. So yeah, literary devices or poetic devices, can be used to express this connotative meaning. Okay, so music for your eyes. Poetry and music have deep connections, and we can be compared together due to the history and uses throughout the ages. Here are some things to look out for with these comparisons. So, poems were generally not read, they were spoken. Okay? And because they are spoken, there's a lot of musical or sound devices that are used, right? And one of them could be, a few of them could be as follows. Meter. This can be available to investigate the different ways. For example, iambic pentameter has a strict 5 beats per line, just like a musical score is used. Right, so iambic pentameter, and when they mean stressed rhymes, is you have you know that song do re mi fa sol la ti do, when you sort of preparing your voice, certain things are stressed in that rhyme. If you go do re mi fa so can you see how certain words are stressed and certain words are unstressed? That's what they mean. Okay, it's to create a musical flow. Sorry, I'm not the best singer but hope you get my example. So rhythm, just like music, poetry can have a rhythm, but if there is no given meter, it is needed to look close and observe what this does to the work. For example, a particular beat that is fast could make the poem happy. Right. Special effects, looking for not so obvious signs where the poet has written in a way so that you take longer to pronounce words. Also, it is possible to grab your attention in other ways. For what reason has the writer done that? Okay, and no, Shakespeare did not use special effects. If you're ever thinking of whether he included thus and thou and thee, so it would take long for us to pronounce the words. No, that was the English. That was modern English, because that is modern English, right? We live in postmodernism. That's our current society. So that was modern English, and thou and thy is normal English. Okay, he was not using special effects. Okay, anyway, moving on. Rhyme. There are many different types of rhyming techniques used within poetry. Once identified, look at how it impacts on the work. Like, is it humorous? Right, so be careful to look for unusual patterns or rhymes. Sound effects, the depiction of different sounds can be powerful, and also use different voices. Look at the impact it has on a piece and why. So sound effects, you could bring in your alliteration, which is the doubling of a consonant, your assonance, the doubling of the vowel sound, right? So one, the letter doubles, one, the vowels double, or the sound doubles, right? So that could be sound effects that are used, and that can also add to the mood or tone of the poem. Breaking rules. A lot of the times, poets don't conform to the rules, and that has meaning as well. Okay, and then the tone is obviously the attitude or mood of the poem. Okay, so literary devices. Look at the literary devices used in the poem, and that will help you analyze the poem. Okay, form of the poem. How is it written? We discussed this with the coffee cup, right? This document will be made available to you, so don't worry about writing notes. I will try and get it to you. Conclusion or feel of the poem. Lastly, you can look at analyzing the emotions and feelings that are linked to the poem or the poet, and what you feel when you read the poem. This is a critical part of reviewing a poem, because we analyze the inner depth of the poem, the intention of feelings, and the poet. Right, so basically I'm going to skip to what does this then mean? And how would you then prepare for your poetry essay or poetry exam? Right, so basically preparing for your exam, you would have the unseen poem, right? So how to tackle the unseen poem. You would scan the poem. So what is the title saying? Who is the poet? What is the structure of the poem? Can the structure help me understand? Read the questions. What information is each question giving me? Are there any clues as to the meaning of the poem? Fine reading of the poem. Use knowledge you have gained. Read each line carefully, right? So when you have your unseen poem, sort of scan, read the questions, fine read it again, and then answer your question. So it's a look through what the poem's about, read the questions, read it again, the poem in detail, and then answer your question. So when you get an unseen poem, you could use this format. Okay, how to revise your poems for the exams. Now when you're studying your poems for the exam, study under the following things. Read through each poem carefully, go through all the notes you have on each poem, go through your questions and answers for that poem, make a summary sheet for the poem, right? So you could use this format when you are revising for your poetry. So the poetry essay, just in short, on the essay, you can try, if time permits, you can look at all the poems that you have done and create an analysis essay on each one, and this will help you sort of be prepared for whether that poem is in your test or not, right? It's a good example. It's a lot of work, I know, but it will prepare you better. So you could use this process and generate an essay for all the poems that you've done prior to that, gaining you some practice in writing a literary essay, and also helping you study for those poems. Okay, so you can use this format for the poetry essay. Okay, and that brings me to the end of the poetry section. I wish you good luck for your test, and please behave. Please be safe out there as well. Right,